And now your tropical update. Here's the latest advisory. A look from above. The latest forecast track. They're big and bad.
Folks, please take cover immediately.
The most terrorizing twisters of all time.
Unbelievable!
The deadliest.
I'll never get my husband's screaming out of my head.
The most destructive.
Damage is being done in Tuscaloosa.
A monster that rips a newborn from its mother's arms.
I was begging to die because I'd lost Leah.
An unpredictable giant that slams storm chasers.
Next thing you know, it's just this violent tumbling over and over and crush, crush, crush.
And a tornado so devastating, it still causes panic long after it's gone.
It wasn't just a little fear. This was a big, bad fear.
We're counting down the top 10 worst tornadoes. Tornadoes. They're the most ferocious forces that Mother Nature can muster up. Hello, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori, and prepare yourself for a wild ride as we roll out the top 10 worst tornadoes of all time. Here in the U.S., we average about 1,300 tornadoes a year, which on average kills 70 people. These twisters come in all shapes and sizes and can last seconds or be on the ground for hours. But we're talking about the most malicious supercells and extraordinary super outbreaks ever to touch down in the U.S.
When you see one of these monster tornadoes, you'll never forget it. It's etched in your brain forever because it's almost like you're having an outer-body experience. Like you can't believe what you're seeing is real.
It's always kind of shocking to see that nature can become so explosive and so deadly.
There aren't very many things that are capable of knocking houses down, and yet tornadoes can do that without a whole lot of trouble.
We often get questions about, well, why don't we just do something to dissipate tornadoes? Well, the answer is that energy concentration is so large that it would take something like a thermonuclear device to dissipate a tornado.
It's like watching a rotational bomb go off. And they're very dangerous. And they're a little bit mysterious. We don't exactly understand why they form, and we can't predict them very far in advance.
Our countdown criteria was determined by the Weather Channel's world-renowned severe weather experts and takes into consideration damage, deaths, size, and strength. So let's get started, and we do so with a real beast. It's one of the widest twisters ever recorded, and its unusual movement made it a nightmare for storm chasers. At number 10, the 2013 El Reno, Oklahoma tornado. It packed winds up to 295 miles per hour and grew to a staggering 2.6 miles wide. Although it stayed over mostly open terrain, its huge size and unusual movement caught dozens of storm chasers off guard. 4 of them, including well-known veteran researcher Tim Samaras, were killed when their vehicles were thrown.
The tornado has several violent multiple vortices within inside of it, and it makes a turn to the left. And while that's not completely unusual, it's not all that common. And that's one of the things that I think caught a lot of people by surprise was how it did that. The El Reno tornado is clearly going to be remembered for what occurred with storm chasers on that day.
This tornado made a rather abrupt left turn, but often as they make that left turn, they begin to shrink. This one actually was growing to its maximum width as it was making that turn, which made it very, very dangerous.
We had a tornado hunt crew that took a direct hit from this tornado as well. They were led by meteorologist Mike Bettis, who's extremely experienced and safety conscious. Here's a first-hand, harrowing account of what they went through.
That's not good for El Reno.
Got to get ahead of it, KP. Got to get ahead of it.
Let's go!
We find a wide shoulder to pull off on. Our 3 cars pull over to the side. We do a broadcast for roughly 2 minutes or so.
Look at that monster. This is a huge tornado.
And then we make the decision that we need to move.
We may actually quickly try to get in our cars and get south of this. That'd be the safest place to do that.
From the time we stop broadcasting to the time we end up getting hit, it's 4 minutes. The tornado expands by a mile and increases its forward speed by 20 miles an hour. Ends up being a perfect storm that just hits us broadside on the passenger side of our car and tosses us off into a field. And I remember yelling to the guys, "Get down."
Hold on, brothers. Hold on.
You know, duck down, and all I'm thinking is cover your head, get down below the windows. Next thing you know, it's just this violent tumbling over and over and crush, 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 and you're just being thrown. And then there's this moment I remember where we were lifted off the ground. It felt like an eternity. It was literally probably a second or two. We're floating in the air, and I'm having this thought, you know, man, like, am I dead? Is this kind of what it feels like to ascend to heaven? And I also remember at the same time, I mean, I saw my wife's face. She didn't say anything. It was just her face that appeared. And then next thing you know, crash! I mean, we come down, we hit hard, and we just start tumbling over and over and over again. I remember when we hit, I remember thinking that I was alive. I remember thinking, man, I'm not dead. I didn't die when we hit. And then we finally stopped, right side up. And I just remember screaming to the other guys, "Hey, are you okay? Are you okay?" And they all responded back. Everyone was alive, everyone was conscious, and it was just a huge relief to know that everyone had made it through it.
I was recording out of the window, and I rolled the window up. All of a sudden, the window bashes out. I'm just trying to hold on to the camera. I've got it, the camera around my lens. It's on my shoulder, and I'm just trying to hold on. And I couldn't hold on after a while, and it just flew out. It just flew out. I didn't know what happened to it, and luckily somehow it landed and kept recording. And actually, it's the camera that's shooting this interview right now.
I watched that video of that camera landing in the field, perfectly framing our truck, just rolling through that field. I mean, it's amazing, and I just, every time I see it, it feels like you're watching your own death.
What an incredible and terrifying ordeal to have to go through. Our next event began while 24 states were holding primary elections to select a presidential candidate. At number 9, it's the 2008 Super Tuesday outbreak. It generated 86 tornadoes over 15 hours across 10 states in the lower Ohio Valley and the southern U.S.
This is the largest February tornado outbreak on record. Pretty rare for this time of year, certainly not unheard of for there to be tornado outbreaks in the months of January and February, but usually you're expecting them later on in the spring.
And some of these tornadoes were nighttime tornadoes, and so they're hard to see coming. And so people don't have all the sensory information that they might otherwise have in a daytime outbreak.
There were 57 fatalities, making it the second deadliest outbreak in the month of February since 1950. 31 people were killed in Tennessee, which took the brunt of the system.
The outbreak featured 5 tornadoes that were rated EF4, including one that hit Jackson, Tennessee. Every building of Union University was damaged.
I was the most scared I've ever been in my life. And then, I knew there was a lot of damage, but then we walked outside and it was worse than I had ever imagined it would be.
It's a wonder that we didn't have not only dozens, but possibly hundreds of people killed. And we got out of here without anybody killed.
What makes it memorable to so many people is it was given the name Super Tuesday outbreak, is because there were so many people voting that day, because it's a busier day than normal, and it's a busier weather day than normal. And not everyone's watching the weather. Everyone's watching politics that day. And then the weather became the story of the day.
Coming up on our countdown of the top 10 worst tornadoes. A tornado with the highest winds ever recorded. You won't believe what it did to a newborn baby.
That should have killed me, but it didn't. It just flung me.
And later, a twister so powerful that it nearly scared some people to death.
I was hyperventilating like this.
Well, Welcome back to our countdown of the top 10 worst tornadoes. At number 10 was the El Reno, Oklahoma monster, one of the largest tornadoes ever measured. Number 9 was the 2008 Super Tuesday outbreak, which lasted over 15 hours and killed 57 people. Our next tornado was a massive F5 and is known for having the highest measured wind speed on record. At number 8, the 1999 Moore, Oklahoma powerhouse.
Tornado on the ground!
May 3rd, 1999, a day the state of Oklahoma will never forget. Dozens of supercell thunderstorms sweeping across the Central Plains would spawn more than 70 tornadoes.
Look at that wall cloud!
One of those storms would be different from the others. A tornado of epic proportions.
2 tornadoes directly next to each other. Unbelievable!
The instability, the warm moist air low levels, the colder air aloft was in place. Then as we headed later in the afternoon, early evening, a wind maximum, we call it a jet streak, came in from the southwest out of New Mexico and triggered the severe thunderstorms that then went on to produce violent tornadoes.
The outbreak was imminent. It was only a matter of when and where. The answer came at 6:26 p.m. when a tornado touched down just southwest of Amber, Oklahoma. It quickly grew to F2 strength, then F3, F4, and just outside of Bridge Creek, Oklahoma, F5. Bridge Creek was decimated.
We're down there and I'm just grabbing onto we have a 4-month-old baby and my wife, and it just went over incredibly fast, and then came out and saw the church was gone and our house is gone.
Homes leveled and families torn apart, and the worst was yet to come. This incredible aerial video shows the tornado as it moves towards Moore, Oklahoma, almost nothing standing in its wake.
The damage was absolutely devastating. I went up there and looked at it, photographed it, and to see houses completely removed from their foundations was quite impressive.
The tornado was on the ground for nearly an hour and a half, tracking 37 miles and sometimes growing to nearly a mile wide, leaving $1 billion in damage. Schools, churches, businesses, entire neighborhoods were decimated.
The May 3rd tornado had the highest wind speed that's ever been observed by a mobile radar, 318 miles an hour. It also was rated as an F5 tornado with a large area of violent damage from F4 and F5.
The Moore tornado took the lives of 36 people. Almost 600 were injured and thousands left homeless. Some survivors spent nearly 24 hours trapped under the debris. But amid the chaos and destruction came small miracles, stories of survival that defy the laws of nature.
Caught a movement out the corner of my eye. I stopped, looked. Under some debris around the base of a tree, I seen what appeared to be a baby. It looked to me like a rag doll. I reached under the debris and pulled the baby out. When I did, the baby started crying. Yeah, I cried.
That's me. That's the mud baby.
Aaliyah Crago, the mud baby, is now a 15-year-old high school student in Edmond, Oklahoma.
I'm very lucky. That tornado was like one of the biggest recorded. Like the wind speeds were very fast. That should have killed me, but it didn't. It just flung me.
The 1999 Moore tornado flung her about 100 yards after she was ripped out of her mother's arms.
We heard the windows blow out and the house come apart, and it sucked me and Aaliyah up out of the house, and the remaining walls fell on top of my mother and father, and I lost my mother. The area around my house was completely gone. There was nothing left, nothing.
Amy's 43-year-old mother was dead, and now her baby was nowhere to be found. Is there a stronger bond than the one between a mother and daughter?
I was begging to die because I'd lost Aaliyah, and I just couldn't imagine anybody living. To me, my whole family was gone. I was so upset because I wanted to go find my daughter.
Amy was taken to the hospital and didn't learn until 5 hours later that Officer Jolly had found Aaliyah.
It's mind-blowing for me to survive that and everything. I mean, that little baby, Even the police officer that found me said I looked like a baby doll until I moved.
And she got rolled up against the base of a tree, and the chicken wire covered her and kept most of the debris from hitting her.
That was a huge miracle, that's what I think. I mean, that small, like, all that other stuff that was in the debris and stuff, if that should have killed me, it should have hit me, but it didn't.
The tornado left Aaliyah with only 2 small scars, but more importantly, fearless.
I want to chase tornadoes. I want to chase any big storms possible. Be a storm chaser and part-time meteorologist.
To be given back my daughter, who was only 10 months old, meant the world to me. And she's destined for great things. And she will be a great person. You're so lucky to still be alive, and I love you so much, baby girl.
Certainly a story that none of us will ever forget. Much more drama straight ahead. 77 years later, a survivor recalls a terrifying day.
It scared me so bad when my mom actually pulled a mattress up and put us under there. I knew something really bad was happening.
And later, a must-see, how one woman overcame extreme panic after one of the most devastating twisters ever.
I would start panicking if I saw photos, videos of tornadoes, tornado damage.
Soft chews.
We're counting down the top 10 worst tornadoes. So far, we've brought you one of the widest, El Reno, an outbreak on Super Tuesday in 2008, and the Moore, Oklahoma monster, which holds the record for the highest wind speed. Those are all places where you regularly see tornadoes. But number 7 happened in one of the most unexpected parts of the United States. It's the 1953 Worcester, Massachusetts tornado.
The Worcester tornado may not have been anything meteorologically particularly special, except for where it occurred, and the fact that violent tornadoes are fairly rare in New England. And here's one that kills more than 90 people.
In addition to the 94 deaths, over 1,200 were injured. 10,000 left homeless. And there was $52 million in damage, which translates to about $349 million today.
There was really no mention of tornadoes in the public forecast that day, but there was a severe thunderstorm watch that had been issued. It wasn't a tornado watch, but it was the first severe thunderstorm watch that was ever issued for New England.
You know, now if we have a big tornado that occurs any place in the United States, you know, we've got automated systems that communicate the warning messages to people. But back in the early 1950s, even if a forecaster made a forecast, it was still a lot of work to get that message out to people so they could respond.
This tornado pointed out the real need for a national network of radars, and that really began to be established by 1957.
Well-known tornado researcher Howie Bluestein was 5 years old and living in Boston at the time.
I remember being outside and I was playing, and my mother called me to come inside the house. She said, well, there's a tornado and you have to come in, and I was a little bit upset. I remember the sky being a strange yellow color, and things were just not quite the way they usually are. And then, of course, I heard about the Worcester tornado, and it's always been a main event in the back of my mind, a big memory.
As the Great Depression lingered on, our next tornado mercilessly struck a small town in North Georgia. At number 6, the 1936 Gainesville twister. Utter devastation. A city laid waste.
In the area of Gainesville that I would say the downtown, we call the downtown area, the destruction was almost complete. Very few buildings were left undamaged. The statue on the square in the center that we call Old Joe was pretty much the only thing that's been left intact since that time.
The tornado itself is said to have formed from 2 funnels that merged over the city of Gainesville, one coming in from the west-northwest, the other from the southwest or west, and then growing into one big tornado.
This F4 killer took over 200 lives, 70 of them alone at a pants factory. This was the highest tornado-caused death toll in a single building in U.S. history. Mostly young female workers perished when the structure collapsed and caught fire.
They had a safe in the building, and they took a picture of that safe later on, and somebody got in the safe thinking they would be safe there, and there was a print of their body where they had actually cooked in the safe.
Doris Heron was 5 years old at the time.
It scared me so bad when my mom actually pulled the mattress up and put us under there. I knew something really bad was happening. I had a little iron that I had brought from my playhouse. When my mom called me in, I grabbed my little iron and held it in my hand the whole time under the mattress, the whole time the storm was going.
The town was reduced to rubble. Survivors were dazed as they climbed from the wreckage. 40 people were never accounted for. 1,600 were injured and 750 homes were destroyed.
2 days after the storm, President Franklin Roosevelt visited Gainesville on his way back to Washington from a trip in Florida. He stopped and gave a speech to what we understand is probably 10,000 people at the train depot. He promised to return to Gainesville when it was rebuilt, and he kept that promise in March of 1938, when almost 2 years later he returned to cheering crowds of up to 50 to 60,000 people who saw him on the courthouse lawn.
We're halfway home, but the worst is yet to come, including the deadliest since 1947.
It's a massive tornado, massive destruction.
And you won't want to miss the amazing story of how one woman overcame her nightmarish fear of tornadoes.
That one is a scary one. I may have watched about 200 tornado videos and 300 or 400 pictures of them.
And now your tropical update. Here's the latest advisory. A look from above. The latest forecast track. We're halfway home in our countdown of the top 10 worst tornadoes. We started with El Reno that killed 4 storm chasers. 9 is the 2008 Super Tuesday outbreak. That's followed by the Moore, Oklahoma monster and a rare New England F4 twister. And number 6 decimated downtown Gainesville, Georgia in 1936. Our number 5 was the second biggest outbreak on record at the time. It was Palm Sunday, 1965, and many people were attending church services. One possible reason why some people never got the warnings. "48 tornadoes terrorized 6 states across the Midwest. It lasted 11 hours, and the combined damage path was over 1,000 miles. This outbreak was one of the most violent and deadly ever.
There were 17 tornadoes in this outbreak, rated F4. All told, about 260 deaths.
138 people were killed in Indiana alone, making it the deadliest outbreak in the state's history. The town of Dunlap was hit especially hard. A twin-funneled F4 obliterated a trailer park, killing 14 people. Then, a half hour later, another F4 slammed directly into Dunlap, killing another 36.
In some cases, tornadoes that twined about each other, thought initially to be part of the same tornado, but afterwards realized to be one tornado still in progress while another one was forming right beside it.
Almost 3,500 were injured, and of the 48 tornadoes, 21 were killers.
The Palm Sunday tornado also gave rise to, as a response to the National Weather Service changing the way it tried to communicate information about tornadoes to people because of what was viewed as the very large death toll and the fact that given the large area that was affected, we ought to be able to tell people something more than we currently do.
Our next tornado was absolutely wicked, bulldozing a small Midwestern town. It's the single deadliest tornado on record since 1947 and the costliest in U.S. history. At number 4, the 2011 Joplin, Missouri twister. It started with a storm that wasn't that impressive on radar. but turned into a natural disaster of epic proportions for the city of Joplin, Missouri.
To get to your basement immediately, the lowest, most interior room of your home. You want to stay away from windows.
Probably not even going to be visible, so everyone that lives in downtown Joplin and then east side of Joplin, that's where it is right now. You have to take shelter as quickly as possible.
The city of almost 50,000 people was under siege by a massive EF5 tornado that threw debris 1,800 feet in the air.
The tornado came about over a very short period of time, less than 5 minutes, from basically a very strong thunderstorm to an incredibly violent tornado. And that happened to occur on the boundary of a densely populated city.
It's a massive tornado, massive destruction. It's like, it's at least, it's a mile-wide tornado. It's leveling the south side of Joplin right now.
The twister was on the ground for almost 20 minutes, cutting a swath 3/4 of a mile wide through the city.
We just held each other because we knew it was over. We were gone. The sound, I'll never ever get that sound out of my head. I'll never get my husband's screaming out of my head.
I decided that I wasn't going to make it, but I did. I don't know how I survived.
Over 13 miles later, it stopped, wiping a big part of Joplin off the map. A crew from the Weather Channel's tornado hunt team was chasing the storm and arrived just 10 minutes after the twister touched down.
Yeah, it's tough. No question about that.
I'm looking at one of the biggest tornado disasters that this country may have ever seen. And I knew that in the back of my mind, and I think it just got to me, and I just couldn't keep my emotions in check at that moment. It just became, you just had to be human.
In all, over 150 people lost their lives. 2,000 buildings were destroyed. To put it in perspective, this is Joplin before the tornado. This is after.
Happy to be alive, you know? Like, we just look at each other randomly every now and then and just give each other a hug. And even though we haven't bathed in, 3 or 4 days, it's just amazing to be alive.
The Joplin tornado is the worst of the modern era. Ever since we've had any kind of tornado warnings or any kind of tornado watches. In fact, it's the deadliest tornado in the United States since 1947.
I think the Joplin tornado may have killed quite a few people, in part because it was embedded in precipitation and not readily visible.
It appears to have caught a lot of people by surprise. There were a large number of fatalities that occurred away from home. In most tornadoes, about 85% of all the fatalities occur inside of people's houses. In this tornado, that number was about 50%.
Sometimes it's still a little difficult for me to talk about it. I think it's affected everybody the way it's affected me. I didn't have any physical damage at my home or my business, but it's affected me emotionally, and sometimes it's a little difficult for me to talk about it without getting a little emotional.
But as the rebuilding and recovery began in Joplin, the horror was just beginning for some.
The name of the phobia that I developed was called phobia. That one is a scary one.
Well, she was having panic attacks and a real high level of anxiety due to her fear of tornadoes.
I was experiencing a racing heartbeat, sweating, thoughts of doom, of being trapped, of not knowing what to do or where to go. And I was hyperventilating like this. Every day I would check the weather in the morning, I would check the weather in the afternoon or at night or whenever I could. And if there was a storm predicted to come in, I did not want to go anywhere. If I opened the door and there were some clouds floating by that even looked like they might be kind of big, I'd shut the door. Somebody somewhere talking about tornadoes, I started panicking. And I would start panicking if I saw photos, videos, anything like that.
I was very concerned because she wouldn't admit she had it initially, and we kept arguing over the fact that She wouldn't some days go to work. She wouldn't, all she'd do is listen to the Weather Channel. And if it said anything about any kind of bad weather, she wasn't going anywhere. And, you know, you can't live that way.
It's taken me about 3 months to actually realize I did have a phobia. It wasn't just a little fear. This was a big bad fear.
This shows you just how scary tornadoes are and how much panic they can create. But stick around for Karen's quest to overcome her terror of twisters.
It took an immense courage because I had fallen all the way down to the bottom of a very high mountain.
And still 3 more terrorizing twisters. Which tornado is the worst of all time?
So I'm going to hold one recommended brand in North America.
We're counting down the top 10 worst tornadoes. We started with Reno, Oklahoma in 2013, followed with the Super Tuesday outbreak in 2008. At number 8 is the 99 Moore, Oklahoma monster. 7 saw the strongest twister ever to hit New England. 6, the 1936 Gainesville, Georgia killer. At 5, the prolific Palm Sunday outbreak. And number 4 killed 161 people in Joplin, Missouri. The tornado in Joplin cost $2.8 billion in damage, making it the costliest in U.S. history. While the physical damage was immediate and tragic, the emotional scarring was long-lasting. As you saw before the break, Karen Herman was tremendously affected by it. Here's the rest of her story.
I would start panicking if I saw photos, videos, anything like that of tornado damage. We got our storm shelter installed. It really helped me to feel better. Mainly just knowing there was a safe spot to go to.
We had a tornado watch out, and I came home and she was in the shelter, and she said that there was a tornado watch out. It took me 2 hours to convince her that the tornado watch for this area had been canceled.
They're all just sitting there staring at it.
Helped her get over this anxiety and fear by exposing her in light doses to the things that she was traumatized by. And we started out by pictures of things that happened in Joplin. After she would look at them, her anxiety level would start increasing, and she would become aware of it, and then we'd process a little bit and then let her relax.
I could actually deal with being around tornadoes and viewing pictures and videos of them and being around tornado damage. I may have watched about 200 tornado videos and 300 or 400 pictures of them. I get to where they're okay. I can live with them.
Karen even created a webpage to help others with this debilitating phobia.
I am trying to support people who are having similar problems and maybe need some ideas on how to deal with it.
I'm extremely proud of Karen for the fact that she works so hard, and also Karen has been real good at trying to help other people overcome the fear of tornadoes and storms.
It took an immense courage because I had, if you want to think about it this way, I had fallen all the way down to the bottom of a very high mountain. What it essentially takes is a desire to get out of it, to feel better. And I was tired of being afraid of going out when there's weather out there.
It's just amazing how powerful the mind can be. Up next on our countdown, an outbreak that included multiple EF5 tornadoes and was responsible for the deadliest tornado day since 1925. At number 3, the Super Outbreak of 2011.
Oh boy, we have a debris ball.
Folks, please take cover immediately.
Oh, right there. There's your funnel. The damage is being done in Tuscaloosa.
One of the worst tornado outbreaks in American history.
In late April, a record-breaking eruption of tornadoes tore through the South, leaving a deluge of death and devastation in its path.
That was it. We got out and everything was like this.
Not only were there an unprecedented number of tornadoes, up to 349 over 4 days, 10 of those were EF4s, and 4 were EF5s.
When the storms came up on radar, and I saw the hook echoes on supercell after supercell after supercell, I thought, oh my, some people are going to be in tremendous danger. And I just knew from looking at the radar that serious damage was being done and people were probably going to lose their lives. Nothing you can do about it.
You start seeing that first tornado touchdown, and then the next one, and then the next one, and they start coming rapid fire. When's it going to stop? How many are there going to be? How big are they going to be? How many towns are they going to wipe out?
On April 27th, around 5 p.m., an exceptionally large and destructive tornado struck Tuscaloosa, Alabama. 40 minutes later, the same tornado struck the suburbs of Birmingham.
One of the things that struck me on April 27, 2011 was how many debris balls were showing up on radar. Big quasi-circular areas that were there because it was debris that were being picked up by the tornadoes, enough that the radar beam was reflecting off that. I probably saw more that day than I had seen the entirety of my career prior to that.
There were 349 tornadoes, a record for a continuous outbreak, and part of a record 758 tornadoes reported in the month of April alone. The average is 234. Over 360 people died, the likes of what hasn't been seen since the 1930s.
There were 4 tornadoes in the 2011 super outbreak that were rated EF5. I flew one of the ones that was rated a high-end EF4, hit Tuscaloosa, looked at it from the air. It looked as if an army of bulldozers that just knocked down everything in the path of the tornadoes.
Still ahead, the worst 2 tornadoes in U.S. history, as determined by our experts. Which twister will be number 1? We conclude our countdown of the most destructive and deadly of all time.
This one was just a mammoth, and it was more like a trunk tree that actually came out of the sky.
Hey, Lily.
Welcome back to our countdown of the top 10 worst tornadoes. We started with the El Reno twister, then on to Super Tuesday 2008. The 1999 Moore Monster was next, followed by Worcester and Gainesville. The Palm Sunday outbreak, number 5. Joplin is number 4. And number 3 is the devastating 2011 Super Outbreak. That late April 2011 outbreak is being compared to our next entry, the 1974 Super Outbreak that killed 315 people and injured 5,000. And that's why it's number 2 on our countdown.
Nobody ever dreamed what was coming.
At the time, the Super Outbreak of 1974 was the worst tornado outbreak in U.S. history.
We actually saw the tornado as it was going through. We saw the black cloud, and it was swirling with debris, and of course you could see the electrical lines snapping and so on. This one was just a mammoth, and it was more like a trunk tree that actually came out of the sky.
In 24 hours, 147 twisters touched down in 13 states, cutting a combined path of more than 2,500 miles.
Prior to 2011, the 1974 Super Outbreak was the benchmark by which we judged all other tornado outbreaks. It held most of the records for destruction by tornadoes. Now it still has several of those. That has the most killer tornadoes for any tornado outbreak, and the most that were rated F4 or F5, nowadays EF4 or EF5.
6 F5 twisters with wind speeds up to 300 miles per hour hit cities from Alabama to Ohio. Among the worst hit during the outbreak, the city of Xenia, Ohio. The F5 tornado cut a path 31 miles long, demolishing about half the buildings in the city of 27,000. 300 homes were destroyed, 9 churches were damaged, and 7 of the 12 schools in the city were totaled. 32 people were killed, and more than 1,300 treated for injuries.
And when we went to town, everything was blown away. I mean, for about a block or two, just wiped away. My house, my mother's house was blown away.
The final numbers of the great tornado outbreak of 1974 were staggering. Over 300 dead, 5,500 injured, and over $1 billion in damage.
It just makes you realize how fleeting life is. Because when you're 30 and 40 years old, you don't think about dying.
The lasting legacy of the Super Outbreak was the research that came afterwards.
The 1974 Super Outbreak was not only studied by meteorologists, but also by teams of engineers, and that really began the process of evaluating whether or not we were assessing tornado wind speeds properly, ultimately leading to what is now the enhanced Fujita scale, that engineers basically say that most homes, it doesn't take 200 mile per hour winds or higher to destroy them. Prior to that, the original Fujita scale said that it might be over 300 miles per hour to do that.
But what's considered the worst tornado of all time? Well, this one roared across 3 states, killed 695 people, and injured 2,000. That makes it number 1 on our list. It's the 1925 Tri-State tornado. It was the age of prohibition and silent films. Art Deco was just coming into vogue. But on March 18th, 1925, it was a tornado that grabbed all the headlines in America.
The Tri-State tornado is one of the seminal weather events in U.S. history. It goes along probably with the Galveston hurricane and the blizzard of 1888. It's the most important weather events in U.S. history.
It killed almost 700 people, making it the deadliest twister in U.S. history. And it still holds the record for the longest continuous track on the ground.
They think now that what initially had thought of been a 219-mile continuous path may have really had a couple of gaps in that, produced by one after another, a series or family of tornadoes.
It was basically on the ground for 3.5 hours as it barreled across southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, and southwest Indiana at an average speed of 62 miles an hour. There was no organized warning system in existence, and few people had any inclination of what was to come.
It was a low cloud base. It was a wide tornado, so it just looked like maybe clouds on the ground or a bad storm, and a lot of people stood out in front of it, didn't take what little shelter they could have taken because they didn't recognize it.
Over 15,000 homes and 9 schools were destroyed. 69 students and 30 farm owners were killed. Winds were estimated at over 260 miles per hour.
A lot of people have died in rural areas, but very few farm owners have been killed. They are extremely weather-wise people. They had no idea what they were facing. Why this thing was so shrouded in debris and a rolling fog, and so shrouded in cloud so as to make it invisible and unrecognizable to farmers, we don't know. But I think it was because it was a unique event. Perhaps something that doesn't occur perhaps once in 1,000 years.
The Tri-State tornado, March of 1925, is our undisputed #1 tornado, the king of tornadoes.
That's it for our countdown of the top 10 worst tornadoes. You know, with all of today's advances in technology and increased lead times, more and more lives are being saved. But it's amazing that we still can't fully escape Mother Nature's fury. I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Thanks for watching. And now your tropical update. Here's the latest advisory. A look from above. The latest forecast track.
Are you afraid?